when a man tried to intimidate a woman at the gym. He had no idea she was a Navy SEAL. What happened next left the entire room speechless. The Midtown Fitness Center in Phoenix was alive with the usual chaos of an after-work crowd. Machines clanged. Sneakers squeaked on the rubberized floor. And music thumped faintly in the background. Among the gym-goers was Kendra, a 34-year-old black woman who exuded confidence and focus. Her routine was precise deadlifts, burpees and pull-ups. She didn't talk much, didn't linger, and never drew attention to herself. Today was no different. Kendra wore her usual gym attire, simple black leggings and a tank top, and had her earbuds in. A silent message that she wasn't there for small talk. As she adjusted the weights on the squat rack, a man approached her. His presence loomed uninvited like a storm cloud. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, and clearly someone who spent significant time in the gym. But there was something off about him. The way he smirked when she noticed him made her instinctively straighten her posture. "You're using that wrong," he said, his voice tinged with condescension. Kendra raised an eyebrow, taking one earbud out. "Excuse me," she replied evenly. "The weights," he continued, gesturing broadly. "You're not setting them upright. You could hurt yourself." Kendra gave a small polite smile. "Thanks, but I've got it." But he didn't leave. Instead, he crossed his arms and planted himself firmly beside her, as though staking a claim on the equipment. "I've been coming here for years," he added. "Let me show you the proper form." "No need," Kendra said firmly, putting the earbud back in and turning to her barbell. The man's smirk faded, replaced by a scowl. He muttered something under his breath. Something Kendra didn't catch but could feel in the air. A couple of people nearby glanced over, sensing the tension, but no one intervened. It was one of those moments where people convince themselves it's not their business. Kendra continued her workout, her movements fluid and controlled. But the man stayed close, watching her with a mix of irritation and disbelief. Every time she switched exercises, he seemed to find a reason to follow. Muttering critiques she ignored. And then it happened. Kendra moved to the bench press, adjusting the weights, when he spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Women like you think they know everything, huh?" She froze mid-movement. Slowly she turned to him, her expression calm but her eyes blazing. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" The room felt quieter, as though the clatter of weights and hum of conversation had dimmed. Just a little. A few heads turned, curious but hesitant to get involved. The man shrugged, clearly emboldened by the attention. "I'm just saying. Maybe you should stick to what you're good at." Kendra didn't take the bait. Instead, she gave him a long, measured look, then calmly returned to her workout. But the air was charged now, an invisible line drawn in the sand. And it was only a matter of time before someone crossed it. The man didn't let it go. His words hung in the air, sour and bitter, feeding into the room's unease. Kendra could feel his gaze on her. Like a weight of its own, she finished her set, ignoring the simmering tension, and moved to the water fountain. It was only a few steps away, but it gave her enough time to assess the situation. She'd seen men like him before, arrogant, insecure, desperate for control in any space they entered. She wasn't intimidated. Years of discipline and training had taught her how to stay calm under pressure. But that didn't mean she couldn't feel the heat of the moment rising. As Kendra reached for her water bottle, the man followed. He leaned against the wall, Arms crossed, his jaw tight with indignation. "Hey," he barked. "I'm talking to you." Kendra paused, her grip tightening on the bottle. But she didn't look at him. Instead, she calmly took a sip and placed the cap back on. Her movements deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath. But she knew better than to escalate. "Look," he continued, his tone dripping with condescension. "You don't have to act all tough. If you're struggling, just say so I can help." Kendra turned to face him now, her voice measured and cool. "Struggling? The only thing I'm struggling with is your inability to leave me alone." A few gym goers glanced over, sensing the shift in her tone. Some paused their workouts entirely, the weight of unspoken questions evident on their faces. Would he back off? Would she let it slide? The man laughed, but it was a sharp, humorless sound. "You think you're better than me?" he snapped, stepping closer. "What makes you so special?" Kendra's eyes narrowed, but she kept her voice steady. "Nothing makes me special. But I know how to handle myself." "Do you?" That seemed to strike a nerve. His face darkened and he stepped even closer, his voice dropping into a low, threatening tone. "You better watch your mouth." The tension in the room was palpable now. People were no longer pretending not to notice. A young man on a treadmill hesitated, glancing at Kendra, then at the man, as if trying to decide whether to intervene. But Kendra caught his eye, and gave the slightest shake of her head. She didn't need anyone stepping in. At least not yet. But the man wasn't just angry. He was unraveling. And everyone in the room could feel the moment, teetering on the edge of something dangerous. The man's anger boiled over, his fists clenching at his sides. He took another step closer, now invading Kendra's personal space. She didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened, her eyes locked on his, calm and unshaken. It wasn't defiance, it was precision control. A silent message that she wasn't afraid. "You've got a smart mouth, don't you?" he spat, his voice loud enough to echo off the gym walls. By now the room was on edge. A few gym employees behind the counter whispered among themselves, uncertain whether to step in. Others stayed frozen, caught in the awkward paralysis of wanting to help, but not knowing how. Kendra took a breath, exhaling slowly. "You need to calm down," she said firmly. Her voice carried no anger, only authority. It wasn't a suggestion, but her words only seemed to ignite him further. He reached out, grabbing her arm roughly. Gasps rippled through the gym. Kendra didn't move at first, her body eerily still, as if calculating the situation. "What are you going to do about it?" he sneered, his grip tightening. And that's when everything changed. Kendra moved so quickly that the man didn't even register what was happening. Her free hand shot up, grabbing his wrist in an ironclad grip. With a swift, fluid motion, she twisted his arm, forcing him to release her. The sudden reversal of power stunned him, his face contorting with shock and pain. As she stepped back, placing herself out of reach but fully in control. "Let me make one thing clear," she said, her voice steady and sharp, cutting through the stunned silence of the gym. "You don't put your hands on me ever." The man stumbled back, clutching his wrist, his bravado visibly crumbling. But instead of retreating, he let out a frustrated roar and lunged at her. This time Kendra didn't hold back. She sidestepped his clumsy attack effortlessly, using his momentum against him. In one seamless move, she swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the mat with a loud thud. The gym erupted into chaos. Certain individuals yelled. Others mixed to move. What's more, a couple of taken out their telephones. Recording the scene, the man moaned. Stupefied and embarrassed as Kendra remained over him. Her position strong and steady. You truly don't have the foggiest idea when to stop. She said, her voice low sufficient that no one but he could hear. Briefly he appeared to think about another endeavor. Be that as it may, the thoroughly search in her eyes halted him cold. She wasn't simply sure. She was prepared risky. The acknowledgement occurred to him past the point of no return. Yet, the trepidation in his eyes said everything. However, the harm was finished, and presently the whole rec center had seen not simply his animosity. Be that as it may, his embarrassing loss. Because of somebody he had underrated. The rec center was humming now, the low murmur of murmurs. What's more, the snap of recording telephones occupying the space. Kendra stood tall. Her breathing consistent as she examined the room. Her nonverbal communication was quiet yet instructing. As though trying any other person to misbehave. The man actually spread on the mat. Mixed to his feet, his face a mixed drink of outrage. Disgrace and disarray. You're insane. He yelled, pointing at her like a cornered creature. You want to barely enough. Kendra cut him off. Her tone cutting through his words like a blade. You've humiliated yourself enough for one day. Leave. A rec center representative at last ventured forward, a young lady with wide eyes and shudder hands. Sir, she said. Her voice temperamental. You really want to go at this point? The man's jaw fixed. What's more, briefly it seemed as though he could stand up too. Yet, the heaviness of the gazes from everybody around him, some irate, others disturbed, appeared to soak in. His shoulders drooped as he stepped back. Murmuring something incoherent. He snatched his sack from a close-by seat and stomped out. Pushing the glass entryway open so hard it shook. As the entryway shut behind him, the room appeared to aggregately breathe out. Somebody applauded, then another. Until a little rush of praise undulated through the group. Kendra lifted a hand motioning for quiet. It's over, she said basically. The group started to scatter. Some getting back to their exercises. Others actually murmuring and looking at her. A young fellow moved toward her carefully. His telephone still close by. That was mind-boggling. He said, his voice loaded up with amazement. Are you like a military craftsman or something of some sort? Kendra gave him a little grin. However, her eyes stayed serious. Something to that effect, she said. Not offering more. Another rec center participant, a moderately aged lady, ventured forward. Are you all right? That was startling to observe. I'm fine, Kendra answered, her tone quiet yet firm. Much thanks to you for inquiring. The young lady who worked at the counter showed up again, wringing her hands anxiously. Ma'am, I'm so grieved. I ought to have stepped in sooner. I simply didn't realize you did what you could. Kendra intruded on her, demeanor relaxing. Not every person knows how to deal with circumstances like that. The representative gestured, as yet looking uncomfortable. However, we ought to call the police. He could return. Kendra thought about this briefly. No need, she said at long last. He's not returning, trust me. There was a trust in her voice that ruled out uncertainty. She turned, making a beeline for the storage space to snatch her things. However, as she left, the mumbles proceeded. Also, the heaviness of what had simply occurred weighted in the air, passing on everybody to wrestle with their own contemplations. Kendra strolled into the storage space. Her means estimated and deliberate. As she went after her duffel bag, she got her appearance in the mirror. A quiet formed face gazing back. There was no victory in her appearance. No hint of boasting. This wasn't tied in with demonstrating something to anybody. It was tied in with saying something. Regard isn't discretionary. She stuffed her things peacefully, allowing the adrenaline to blur. Similarly, as she dashed up her sack, the young lady from the front work area mindfully entered. Her informal ID read Tara. She waited close to the entryway, squirming with the trim of her shirt. "Could I at any point ask you something, Tara?" At long last said Kendra. Turned her look consistent however kind. "Sure." Tara wavered. Then shouted, "How could you stay so quiet? I mean, he was so forceful and you just took care of it. Like how?" Kendra rested up against the seat, collapsing her arms. "There's no need to focus on remaining even-tempered," she expressed. "It's tied in with realizing you can deal with yourself. Dread loses its grasp when you're ready." Tara shifted her head, inquisitive. "So you're prepared, like military or something to that effect?" Kendra gave a little gesture. "I filled in as a Naval Force SEAL for north of 10 years. I confronted more regrettable circumstances than what occurred out there." Tara's eyes extended. "Wow. That makes sense of a ton, yet it's not just about preparing." Kendra added, her tone serious. "It's tied in with understanding when to act. Furthermore, when to let things go." He wasn't simply furious, he was uncertain. Individuals like that search for obvious objectives. At the point when you show them you're not one, they don't have the foggiest idea what to do. Tara gestured gradually, as though handling the heaviness of Kendra's words. "I want to be simply courageous." "You can," Kendra said essentially. "Valiance isn't about not being frightened. It's tied in with standing firm when it is important." As Tara consumed the guidance, the storage space entryway squeaked open. Also, the moderately aged lady, who had kept an eye on Kendra prior, looked in. "Sorry to hinder," she said delicately. "I simply needed to say much obliged. You took care of that with such a lot of effortlessness. Truly, it made me ponder how frequently I let individuals abuse me." Kendra offered a weak grin. "It is generally difficult to support yourself. However, it's vital not only for you. However, for everybody observing." The lady gestured, her appearance smart. "You're correct. I assume I expected to see that." Kendra threw her sack behind her. "We as a whole need updates in some cases." As she got out of the storage space and into the cool evening air, Kendra felt a feeling of calm purpose. She hadn't anticipated any of this to occur. However, perhaps it was intended to. Perhaps somebody in that exercise center expected to see what strength resembled. Not in actual power but rather in self-restraint. In versatility, in declining to allow obliviousness to win. Yet, even as she strolled to her vehicle, she realized the story wasn't just about her. It was about everybody in that rec center, who might leave with another viewpoint. An illustration scratched into their brains about regard, boldness, and the risks of underrating somebody. In view of suppositions, the rec center discharged out leisurely that night. Yet, the occasion remained new to everybody. Discussions undulated through the gathering of regulars, some replaying what they had seen, others scrutinizing their own responses. Why had they faltered? What might they have done another way? The showdown had ignited something more profound than shock. It had constrained individuals to look at their suppositions. What's more, their quietness. Tara, actually shaken yet propelled, sat at the counter after her shift, Looking at her telephone. The video somebody had taken of Kendra's quiet. However, definitive activities had proactively started circling. Online remarks overflowed in esteem, skepticism and, surprisingly, some reflection. She dealt with it like an expert. This is what strength resembles. For what reason did nobody step in sooner? The episode wasn't just about what had occurred. It was about what it uncovered. Again and again individuals underrated others. Whether due to self-importance, predisposition or obliviousness, Kendra had broken those deceptions. With accuracy and beauty, and in doing as such, she had turned into an image of calm power. Kendra herself sat at home, tasting tea as her canine nestled into her feet. Her telephone hummed with messages from rec center individuals, saying thanks to her, applauding her boldness or requesting exhortation. She valued the feeling. Be that as it may, didn't consider herself to be a legend. For her it wasn't necessary to focus on the spotlight. It was tied in with standing firm despite treachery, regardless of how little or huge the stage. The next week, she got back to the rec center as unpretentious as could be expected. Individuals welcomed her distinctively now, their regard obvious in their grins and gestures. Tara moved toward her modestly, holding out a card simply needed to express profound gratitude. She said, "You've propelled me." Kendra opened the card later at home. Inside was a basic message. "You advised me that strength comes in many structures. Much thanks to you for showing me what it means to stand really tall." It wasn't simply Tara who had mastered something that day. Each and every individual who had seen the showdown, or on the other hand even caught wind of it, had left with an illustration. Regard is acquired, not given gently. Strength isn't about size or grandiosity. It's about resolve and boldness. It's the tranquil demonstration of standing firm at the point when the world anticipates that you should disintegrate. The man then again had vanished from the exercise center completely. Whether from disgrace or dread, nobody knew, except for his activities had left an enduring effect. Not the one he planned, however, one that filled in as a distinct sign of what occurs at the point when obliviousness meets flexibility. As Kendra thought about the occurrence, one idea stuck out. Perhaps the world didn't require more legends. Perhaps it simply required more individuals able to hold fast. What's more, request the regard they merited. On the off chance that the story moved you, share it with somebody who should be helped to remember the force of regard, strength and fortitude, and remember to buy in. For additional accounts that motivate, challenge, furthermore, leave you thinking long after the credits roll.